Ari and the Garden of Stars. Long ago, in a quiet village surrounded by silver-capped mountains, there lived a boy named Ari. He wasn't the fastest runner, the loudest singer, or the best at solving puzzles, but he had a gift no one else noticed: he listened. While other children played games that filled the air with noise and laughter, Ari would sit by the river, listening to the stories carried by the wind and water. He believed that if you listened long enough, everything in the world had a story to tell. Ari's favorite place was a forgotten path behind his house, which led to a crumbling stone wall and a gate overgrown with ivy. Most believed there was nothing beyond the gate, just weeds and shadows. But one evening, as the stars blinked awake, Ari felt something call to him. He followed the call through the gate. Behind it, he discovered an enormous hidden garden, a place unlike anything he'd seen. The sky above the garden sparkled more brightly, and every plant seemed to shimmer. Flowers bloomed in silver hues, vines glowed with moonlight, and tiny orbs hovered like fireflies, singing softly. At the center stood an ancient sundial made of obsidian and crystal. Inscribed around it were the words, "Only those who listen may learn to light the stars." Ari was mesmerized. As he stepped closer, one of the glowing orbs floated down to him and spoke in a whispering voice, "Welcome, listener. The Garden of Stars waits." From that night on, Ari returned to the garden. Every evening, he would sit at the sundial, and the garden would tell him stories, not in words but through feelings, memories, and dreams. He learned that each glowing orb was a star seed, the memory of someone's kindness, hope, or lesson, stored forever. But the garden was fading. Each night fewer orbs sang. Some began to dim and fall to the ground, their light vanishing. Ari asked the garden what was wrong. A deep wind answered, "The world forgets. Children grow too fast. They no longer stop to listen, to wonder. The seeds need new stories, acts of courage, kindness, honesty. Only then will they grow." Ari, though young, made a decision. He would collect new star seeds, not from the sky, but from people. He began each day by helping others. Not in grand ways, but in moments that mattered. He listened to an old baker who missed his daughter and wrote a letter to her. He played quietly with a shy child no one included. He rescued a bird trapped in a thorn bush and nursed it back to health. Every good deed, though small, became a story. At night, he returned to the garden, and from his pockets, he emptied invisible moments. As they touched the ground, they turned into new star seeds, glowing softly before rising into the sky. Word of Ari spread, though he never asked for it. People began to come to him with problems, not for solutions but to be heard. Ari listened. Then he shared what the garden taught him, that listening is the root of widerstanding, and understanding is the seed of peace. One winter, a terrible storm struck the village. Winds uprooted trees and floods swept through fields. Houses were damaged. People were afraid and angry. Ari, too, was afraid, but the garden whispered, "The stars are brightest in the darkest skies." He gathered villagers in the old schoolhouse. Let us tell each other our fears, not with shouting, but with listening. It wasn't easy. But slowly, stories poured out of lost crops, of children's fears, of old wounds. Ari said little. He only listened, and that was enough. As people felt heard, they began to help each other. One by one, they stood, offering blankets, food, even just a kind word. That night, Ari returned to the garden with a heart full of their stories. The garden burst into radiant light. Hundreds of starseeds rose like a galaxy. For the first time, the stars in the garden were visible from the village. From then on, others found their way to the gate behind Ari's house. Children who learned to listen, parents who remembered how, travelers who longed to believe again. Ari grew older, his hair silvered like the mountain peaks. He became known as the keeper of stars. When it was time for him to rest, Ari sat one last time by the sundial. He closed his eyes, listening not to the wind, but to the beating hearts of all those he'd touched. As his final breath left his lips, a star seed brighter than any other rose from his hand and garden of stars, where stories become light and listeners become legends, joined the sky, and to this day, if you walk gently and listen closely, you may find the gate, and behind it, the tree who remembered names. In a faraway valley where the skies were painted with lavender light and the air always smelled like wild honey, there stood an ancient tree. It was taller than 5 houses stacked together, with bark as thick as castle walls and leaves that shimmered like emeralds under the moonlight. This was no ordinary tree. It was called Thelin, the tree who remembered names. Thelin was planted at the very beginning of time by the first storyteller of the world. He had only one task: to remember the names of every kind and brave soul who had ever lived. Children from all the nearby villages would visit Thelin, leaving behind whispers of their names and promises of kindness. In return, the tree would protect their dreams. Legends said that if Thelin remembered your name, your goodness would never be forgotten even by the stars. For centuries, all was peaceful. Then came the age of rush. People became busier. Adults stopped telling stories. Children stopped listening to the wind, and names were no longer spoken to the tree. Thelin, still and faithful, began to forget. His leaves grew pale. His roots ached. In a town just beyond the hills lived a girl named Amari. She had big, curious eyes and a habit of asking why, more often than most grown-ups could handle. One afternoon, Amari wandered into the valley, chasing a paper bird she had folded. The wind had snatched it from her hands and carried it far beyond where she'd ever been allowed to go. There, she saw the great tree, alone and silent. Drawn to it, she approached and placed her hand on the trunk. "You're not just a tree, are you?" To her amazement, the bark beneath her hand pulsed, warm like a heartbeat. A deep voice filled her mind, not spoken aloud, but felt like a dream. "You still remember how to ask." Amari stayed with Thelin for hours, listening to him speak of the old world, of names long forgotten, and of the silence that now plagued the valley. "I can remember again," Thelin said, "but I need help. Amati promised, right then, to help Thelen remember names again. She returned home and told her friends about the tree who remembered. Some laughed, some didn't believe her, but one boy named Jalen, who missed his grandfather dearly, followed her. He whispered his grandfather's name to the tree. The next day, a silver leaf grew on Thalen's lowest branch. The children began to come. Each whispered the name of someone they loved, someone kind, someone who helped others. The tree grew stronger with every name. Amari created a ritual. Every Friday, at sunset, children gathered beneath Thelen, sharing stories about people who had changed their lives with small acts of goodness. There were stories of grandmothers fed stray cats, teachers who stayed late to listen, little brothers who gave up the last cookie, and strangers who smiled at the right moment. Every name became a leaf. One day, an old man from a distant kingdom came to the village. He was known far and wide for his wealth and power, but he was bitter, always surrounded by guards and silence. He laughed when he saw the children around the tree. A tree remembering names? What foolishness! Amari, now older and wiser, simply replied, "Would you like the tree to remember yours?" The man scoffed, "What for? When I'm gone, my name will be carved on towers." "But towers crumble," she said. "This tree only remembers names connected to kindness." The old man went quiet. That night, alone under the stars, he whispered a name to the tree, not his own, but his sister's. She had once given up everything to take care of him. She had passed years ago, and he had never thanked her. The next morning, a golden leaf shone from the highest branch. The man stayed in the village, changed. He taught children skills he had forgotten. He gave without telling anyone, bloomed. And one day, when he passed quietly in his sleep, Thelen whispered his name to the wind, and a new leaf,